It is my pleasure to introduce Ken Willaims from the Department of Drama in the Faculty of Arts, who's going to talk to us about Indigenous Dramaturgy. Ken.
First off, just a couple of phrases to clarify what is dramaturgy. It's a phrase that we have borrowed, Canadian theater artists have borrowed from German theater artists, but we didn't really understand what it meant, so it's actually still a constantly evolving phrase. The way we apply it mostly is in terms of new play creation and how plays are created and what is, I guess, for the lack of a better phrase, what is a well-made play. And that has actually come up with some problems unto itself, because in Canada, what a well-made play is very much a colonial construct, because the biggest theatre festivals in Canada are the Stratford Festival, the Shaw Festival, guess who they're for, and then the Blythe Festival, which was created to allow for new plays by Canadian writers about the rural Canadian experience, which from Ontario was largely a white Canadian experience, a settler Canadian experience. So why is Indigenous dramaturgy important, and what is it? Well, what we have here is what happens when Indigenous people are not in control of their own stories and imagery. We see things like stereotype and cliche coming up over and over again. And what was really kind of sadly ironic was the very first English-Canadian play to make a major splash in Canada, written by a Canadian artist, was The Ecstasy of Rita Joe, which was about the eventual destruction and disappearance of Indigenous people as viable, as exciting, as culturally relevant. It was actually, sort of the fetishness of their disappearance. So Indigenous theater artists also had problems getting into these colonial spaces, so they would have to sort of bend themselves to fit into these roles. They were not allowed to be, they were kind of not allowed to be theater creators for a long time. That changed with Native Earth Performing Arts and other Indigenous theater companies that came along, and Indigenous theater artists started to create their own art. They started to create art for their own audiences, which led to another problem. What is Indigenous dramaturgy? Well, we are now seeing a sort of second, third wave of Indigenous creative artists who are looking at creating their own way of making plays within colonial spaces. And what we did with a partnership engagement grant is we managed to bring together one lead dramaturge, two emerging dramaturges, and four playwrights of various levels to the University of Alberta to actually, for the first time with an all-Indigenous cast, have a completely unique experience where we had just us. It was part of something we called witnessing, gathering, and sharing, and this kind of what it looks like. It's largely sitting around tables. It's not exciting, but this is the very first part of it, and this is how the next big idea I have is that to create an Indigenous Dramaturgical Center and to leapfrog into that so that I can actually start sharing this information with other Indigenous theater artists and train Indigenous dramaturgists. Thank you.